Well, right now, about 1 million Americans are still without power, if you can believe that, after that brutal winter storm brought massive snow and ice to much of the United States. Was the government or NGOs involved in some sort of a massive cloud seeding chemical geoengineering operation prior to this weekend's storm? Well, look at eyewitness reports all over the country. It doesn't take much to actually find them, reporting the same thing, all reporting the same thing. In the morning, the skies had a few of these lines in the sky, mostly clear, but then a few started to appear. Then by 10 a.m., more and more started to appear all across the skies. Then by 1 p.m., more and more, look at that, more and more start appearing above the skies. And then 3 p.m., again, more of these lines in the skies. And then, of course, we saw what happened, a massive, really devastating storm. We still don't know the effects or the how much of this, the fallout. We don't have the power outages. What will be the total death count? What is the operation here? Dane Wigington is the leader over at geoengineeringwatch.org, and he has been looking at this storm and all of the pieces of this that have gone into making this storm happen over the past few days, and one of our favorite guests to have back here on the show. Dane, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks, Natali. And first, to answer the question, is this storm engineered? Yes, absolutely, 100% top to bottom. I'll get to that, but if I can back up that formerly incredibly important conversation you just had with Colonel Davis. And Natali, I could not agree with you more on your assessment, your anger at the situation. And Iran, whatever we think of their culture or their government, they have not invaded another country for 250 years. And so, again, the amount of deception going on is mind-numbing. And let me weave that into climate engineering. We know Iran has been the victim of climate engineering weather warfare for at least 4 decades. They have completely cut off the flow of precipitation to Iran, so much so that the capital of Iran, with a population of 10 million, they're now considering evacuating 10 million people to where? Because they literally have no water, because the NATO operations, and Iran has specifically named NATO and Israel as cutting off their precipitation for 40 years. That's weather warfare. I wonder why they don't like us over there. And again, they've been on the floor of the UN, on film, on the record, stating emphatically, the president of that country, that NATO's cutting off their precipitation. How is that not an ongoing act of war for 40 years?
I didn't know that.
Right. Actually, can you talk more about that, Dane?
Absolutely. On the floor of the UN, Ahmadinejad from Iran, going back a decade plus, emphatically stating that NATO and Israel were cutting off the flow of precipitation to Iran. And let's plug this in, going all the way back 64 years to President Lyndon Johnson in 1962. This is the beginning 30 seconds of every weekly geoengineeringwatch.org update on our site, all news. First 30 seconds is film footage, Lyndon Johnson stating on film, on the record, that we had the power to control the world's cloud layer then, and he who controls the weather controls the world. Why? Because he who controls the weather can control the flow of precipitation in any country, anywhere, how toxic that rain is, how much rain falls or doesn't. Thus, they can destabilize food supplies. Thus, they can destabilize populations. 40 years, the Iranian climate science meteorological community has stated that NATO is cutting off their precipitation. They're not guessing. They have incredibly sophisticated weather monitoring facilities, just like we have. There's no speculation here. They're cutting off precipitation.
What are the mechanics of that, Dane?
Yeah, that's a good question. How does that work?
Before we get to the U.S. piece of this and the storm,
Yep.
I want to continue on this line of thought. But what are the mechanics of us just cutting it off? I know what Lyndon Johnson said, of course, in Vietnam, and how we used the
cloud seeding
to actually flood the troops. But how do we cut it off?
Climate intervention, aka weather warfare operations, are far more effective at eliminating and dispersing precipitation than augmenting it.
Wow.
They're doing the same. They've done the same thing to the U.S. West Coast. Going back over a decade, my presentations, Engineered Drought Catastrophe, Target California. We can speculate on the agendas and objectives, and there are many, all of them nefarious. They're doing the same thing here, but the mechanisms by which they can completely cut off precipitation by the manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones, high pressure domes, which are exactly what ionosphere heater facilities like HARP create. HARP is a weapon of mass destruction. It's one of about 100 ionosphere heaters around the globe. These facilities, and this is not speculation either, this is science, study, confirmed fact. They, in the case of HAARP, can transmit 3.6 million watts of power to the ionosphere, electrically charged ionosphere. That's a frequency transmission. That causes an electrical chain reaction, superheats that part of the atmosphere, expanding it up and down. The downward push forms a high pressure dome. Nothing can enter that. No moisture can enter that. It spins around it in the northern hemisphere. That creates a clockwise spin. So what we have happening right now, I'll weave all this together. The high pressure dome in the west is spinning all the moisture clockwise up and over the western U.S. They're chemically nucleating it the whole way, spins it back down into the eastern U.S. They combine that with a flow of moisture from the record warm Gulf of Mexico. Since when do winter storms come from the record warm Gulf of Mexico? And they combine those two, and in the transition zone, you have now thunder snow, you have ice storms everywhere because this chemically nucleated material hits the ground before it sets up. These are patented processes, by the way. So back to Natalie's question, how do they cut off precipitation? That high pressure dome, when you're manipulating atmospheric pressure zones, you can cut off moisture from ever even entering a part of the world. Second method, if they overseed with condensation nuclei that's too small, particles that are too small to allow the raindrops to combine and form, what you get is these featureless skies that looks like it should rain, but nothing falls out. Again, those are two methods with which they can completely cut off precipitation to an area for as long as they want. These are patented processes. They've done it to Iran for decades. They're doing it to the U.S. So you end up with these drought deluge scenarios. And the crown jewel weapon for the controllers, Natali and Clayton, is that they can blame all of this on nature.
Well, don't you hate when people say, I told you so? Yeah, that's me, actually, because I did tell you, sorry, but I told you that gold and silver were going to reap the benefits of excessive money printing, the Fed just printing money like crazy, overvalued markets, global unrest. It's here. It's happened. Gold and silver have both soared to all-time highs. So I hope you called our friends at Lear Capital and you bought some. If you didn't, trust me, it's not too late. Experts are predicting even higher prices ahead. And they get it. They know what's coming. Isn't it time, folks? Get yourself some gold and silver today. Call the best in the business. I personally use them. So does Natali. We both do. And our kids do as well in their IRAs. Lear Capital, it's a free phone call. There's no obligation to purchase, just education information on protecting and growing your wealth with gold and silver. I'm sure there are many of you that have called and haven't purchased yet for whatever reason. Don't make the same mistake twice. Now is the time to get some gold shipped directly to you or shift some dollars in your retirement accounts over to physical gold and silver. It's easy to do. Natali and I have done it for both, and I've been extremely satisfied with Lear's knowledge, their service, their prices. I urge you to call today and learn more. Call them, 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com, and you can receive up to $20,000 in free bonus medals with a qualified purchase. Right. Absolutely. And we, by the way, when you talk about HAARP, I mean, we've spoken to whistleblowers who've worked on these HAARP arrays. I've spoken to multiple whistleblowers that have worked on these HAARP arrays and confirmed everything that you just talked about. And not one of them, that I talked about was up in Alaska, one of the HAARP centers in Alaska, which we know
That's the one that's actually called HAARP, HAARP is the acronym. And that's the one people most recognize. It's the biggest facility like it in the world, but there's about 100 similar facilities, different designs. And we also have the NexRad network. That's a frequency transmission network in the continental U.S. that's used to manipulate storms like the Texas flood last July that held that storm in place, caused it to precipitate out in one location. Hurricane Harvey, that's how they know Hurricane Harvey was going to go where it went 7 days in advance. And they knew 7 days in advance it was going to sit there and spin and drop 50 inches of rain, because those frequency transmissions, which are of a different variety than the ionosphere heaters, they have the ability, by a repelling effect on the air mass that's saturated with electrically conductive particulates, to hold that air mass in place if they surround it with these transmissions. So again, from every conceivable level, these storms are being manipulated. And what's happening right now in the continental U.S., and although there are many agendas and objectives with the chemical winter weather warfare, which is taking place, that's exactly what it is. Don't eat the snow. I don't say that in jest. But what do we see from Mr. Trump about this weather? He said, quote, "Where's your global warming now?" So we know the agenda is to drill, baby, drill, and burn, baby, burn, and take over countries that have oil, like Venezuela. So they need cover for that. They need the American population to think that's not a problem. Great. The more, the better. And Trump just tweeted, again, where's your global warming now? Because the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48 is being chemically cooled, combined with robbing cold air from the Arctic. And Clayton and Natali, what don't they tell us? In places like Alaska, where they just had 7 feet of snow in Juneau, Alaska recently, so much snow, chemically nucleated snow that came from a moisture flow from Hawaii, 7 feet of snow, so much it was sinking boats in the Juneau harbor. Literally, you can see pictures of this online.
Yeah.
Followed by rain in Alaska while it's snowing on the Gulf Coast in Florida. What does it take to wake people up? That the whole system is blowing apart. And climate engineering is this biggest single factor tearing it apart. And I'm not saying there's not other sources of damage to the planet. We've been really bad stewards of the planet. And we try at geoengineeringwatch.org to unite both sides of this fence. We have the left that recognizes all the other sources of damage, that refuses to acknowledge climate engineering. And that's very perplexing. And we have the other side of the fence that acknowledges climate engineering, but refuses to acknowledge the other sources of damage. We need to build bridges, not burn them. And this mantra, which we try to instill at geoengineeringwatch.org, I use this with legislators that I'm working with all over the country. How can we have any legitimate discussion about climate, anything from any perspective, without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation?
I mean, as you're saying this about NATO and allies robbing Iran of water.
Yep.
And you think back to last year, Netanyahu holding these clean glasses of water as a taunt to Iranians, saying, overthrow your government and you will have this. Does this not hearken to the Hunger Games? President Snow eating steak in front of these starving people as a result of his own. I can't. That's diabolical to think of.
Get rid of your regime and you can have this water. We'll simply flip it back on for you.
I can't believe we're watching this. I cannot believe we've seen it. I mean, to me, that seems further proof that NATO and allies know it. I mean,
and they're using it. Yeah.
Thank you for being so observant, Natali. I saw that when it happened. That is exactly what that was about. That is exactly the message he was sending with that little display of his. And again, this is when people wave their flags pretending to be patriots here and going along with anything that the powers that shouldn't be do, they should get a clue about what's going on around the world and why so many people in so many countries have so much disdain for what we've done there. Whose military bases in everybody's backyard or on their border, and who's doing the most bombing of who where? I mean, again, Iran has not invaded another country for about 250 years. Who's the aggressor in this equation?
Right.
When you look at the fallout from this storm in the United States, and you saw, if you were online, you saw so many people sharing the same images, like we just showed you of these chemicals in the sky. And as the days progressed, but right before the storm, they were getting more and more prominent, and all of these aircraft going back and forth across the skies. I had reports coming in like crazy. I'm sure you did, way more than anybody else.
Yes.
I guess, like, how do you piece this all together? Because it was widespread. I mean, it was all the way, from the East Coast all the way into the middle of the country. Who's powerful enough to carry this out? Running through NGOs, the United States government in collaboration with them through these NGOs. Let me just play this real quick. Here's President Trump acknowledging these types of being sprayed in the skies, talking to RFK Jr., hoping he'll get to the bottom of it. Watch.
So there's something wrong. There's something wrong. We've done something wrong. There's something, you're going to figure it out. Maybe it's a spray that we spray all over the place that nobody else does. Other countries.
Yeah. Dane?
Yeah, that was a long time ago, and he hasn't said anything since. Neither has RFK. Lee Zeldin doing everything he can to cover up these operations and double down in denial with his official transparent contrail site, just simply regurgitating the official denial of all this. And all that spraying in those images that you showed, Clayton, before this storm was really completely launched, the amount of toxic aerosol dispersing going on above the cloud canopy once you can't see anything up there is mind-numbing. It's off the scale. It's way worse than what you see before the storm comes in, way worse. In my location in the wilderness of Northern California, near the Oregon border, in the forest on top of a mountain, it's the middle of winter. We have not had a freezing temperature here yet. It has not frozen here yet. In the Arctic Circle right now, there's areas that are far above freezing. It's warmer in Greenland than parts of the U.S. right now, and nobody talks about that. So again, what we've seen from this administration is the most aggressive doubling down on denial and cover-up yet. And again, this is not political. It's not a left-right issue in any way, shape, or form. Those who print the money from behind the curtain are the ones pulling the strings. This is certainly DOD involved completely. We know private defense contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, are neck deep in this because Raytheon and Lockheed Martin do all the weather modeling for the nation's weathermen. Why would we need private defense contractors to do the modeling for the nation's weathermen that, oh, by the way, have illegal federal gag orders on them? What will it take? My question is, what will it take to wake the American population up, to get them past their program denial and understand that they are the victims of constant chemical weather warfare right now more than ever? And that material that falls, again, is toxic. Every drop of rain is toxic. We have peer-reviewed study to prove that. And Clayton and Natali, if you're ever around any of this chemically nucleated material, put your hands in it and see how long you can keep them there. It's far colder to the touch than any naturally nucleated snow. It behaves very differently. It tends to sublimate, so we don't get the runoff we should have in the Colorado River drainage basin, by the way. So whatever snowpack is there, and by the way, it's record low levels. How many people know that?
Well, yeah, we're in Colorado, and it's unbelievable. People, I mean... You know, people who've lived here their entire lives. I mean, this is the least amount of snowpack, the least amount of snow that they've seen in their lifetimes in Colorado.
See, Americans don't realize this because this is part of the psychological operation of all they show on media is cold, 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 snow, snow, snow. They'll show Erie, Pennsylvania, Buffalo, New York, where they pile up snow in what amounts to an atmospheric snow blowing machine with atmospheric pressure zone manipulation. They can manipulate surface wind flows, zonal wind flows, so they create wind blowing ferociously across the Great Lakes, the record warm Great Lakes. They chemically nucleate that and pile up mountains of snow in a few isolated locations, and that's all they show on media. They don't show the snow drought in the Rockies and Colorado. And that snow that's there, again, because it's chemically nucleated, it tends to sublimate, which means much of that moisture goes straight from a solid to a liquid, like dry ice, which is the extreme form of a chemically nucleated form of ice. So you don't get nearly the runoff of even the little bit of snow that is there. So how is this not total winter weather warfare or weather warfare period waged on U.S. populations that need to wake up and realize that those in power don't care any more about them than they do anybody anywhere else in the world? In fact, I would argue the U.S. population is rapidly becoming a greater and greater liability to those in power. And that's an ominous scenario.
Can you? I want to know more about this. I see it here. 2012 claims by Ahmadinejad that their clouds are being manipulated. So if you could send me off the chain, and let's do another segment about that.
Yeah,
I would
for
like
sure.
to see more proof.
And that's the tip of the iceberg. We've had this being conducted against countries around the world for decades, and behind closed doors, this is the hammer with which the power structure has threatened those governments to allow U.S. occupations, or they will cut their reign off indefinitely. And this is, again, the crown jewel weapon of the military-industrial complex and has been for many, many decades. Americans need to wake up to what's going on in our skies. And thanks so much to you, Clayton and Natali, for your consistent, credible coverage of this most dire issue.
I'm mad at snakes.
Yeah, thank you, Dane. Just before we let you go, Miss Old School in our chat room says, I saw red and blue things moving in the rain and snow when I took samples and put it under a 300x microscope. And have you heard of that before?
We have a lot of rain samples that are alarming. We don't know the totality of what's being put in this mix at any given time. We do know we have polymer fibers and graphene in the mix. And both of those elements are used militarily as biological carrier platforms to carry a pathogen from the clouds to the ground. We know this with certainty. What's that doing in our rain, and what might they spray on us at any point in time if they feel they're truly losing control? We could expect perhaps some form of biological weapon that's far worse than CV-19. They hold that kind of power, and Americans need to wake up with that. There is no place to hide from what we're breathing in the air column. We have to deal with this, or we're not going to have much to care about for much longer.
Dane Wigington, thank you for always opening our eyes to this. We learn something every time we talk to you, and this is no exception. Absolutely. We're going to dive more deeply into what's happening in Iran on this piece as well. And people need to wake up and demand accountability from their leaders. You got, as you pointed out, Lee Zeldin just basically covering this up and carrying the contaminated water pail for this continuing operation. Dane, great to see you. Thank you as always.
Thank you both.